Hello and welcome to the EV Charging Podcast, where we take you behind the scenes of the electric vehicle industry in Australia and around the world. I'm Jeff.
I'm Dan.
And as always, we're brought to you by Solar Choice, Australia's online quote comparison tool for solar, battery, EV chargers, aircon and heat pumps. So today's a little bit different. We're recording live from the Smart Energy Conference, Dan.
That's right. We're here in Sydney at one of the biggest energy conferences that happens in Australia, put on by the Smart Energy Council. Bit of a fixture in the year for certainly the Solar Choice team, but a lot of people who work in solar, EV, batteries, anything energy related. They tend to come here to find out what's happening in the industry trends, new products, catch up with colleagues. It's a bit of a scene and certainly something that we really enjoy at Solar Choice because we get to find out what's coming up for the next 12 months.
Yeah, and we're joined today by a friend of the show, a friend of Dan and ours. It's Tom Gan, Ludicrous Feeds. Many of our audience will remember him from early episode where we dived into Tom's career. In a nutshell, he's a doctor by day and Ludicrous Feed by night, where he tests all of the latest EV models and has a very real-life review and helps buyers find the best EVs out there. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Dan, for having me on the show. And it's great to be here in Sydney at the Smart Energy Expo. What a great turnout. It's you can feel the buzz and the excitement in the room.
And the buzz is exceptionally loud at the moment for electric vehicles because we're coming off some absolute record months. So some numbers to share. There were 16,000 EVs sold in both March and April, which takes us up to roughly 16% of new sales. And to say that last year, all of 2025, we sat around 8%, we're already at double. And no doubt we're benefiting from the sky-high fuel prices.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, 16.4% was the official BEV numbers of all car sales in Australia in April 2026. This time last year, it was 6.6%, so a huge jump from 12 months ago, year-on-year growth. And you're right, it's pretty much all to do with the war in Iran and the Middle East and a lot of pressure being put on everyday expenses with fuel prices going up. And I think this is just the beginning. I think it'll just grow from here as smart Australians realise that EVs really are quite affordable and quite economical to run.
It's sort of the uptick that a lot of people in the industry and people who really understand EVs and certainly the value of EVs have thought was going to come in the last few years. It's unfortunate that it's come around in these conditions where people are having trouble affording fuel, but any motivating factor will do. And like you said, Tom, I think that so much about EVs and EV uptake is people knowing someone who drives one and hearing about their experiences, hearing about charging cheaply or charging, almost at no cost if you have solar. That's what we're going to see from this wave of uptake. More and more people talking about what it's like owning an EV. And before you know it, the numbers are just going to take off more.
And on a personal note, I think listeners of the show will know that I converted my diesel van to a Polestar 2 months ago. So every time I drive past a fuel station and see the price, I do have a small smug smile on my face.
Congratulations, Jeff. Well done.
And every time you smile, I'm crying because I'm still in my diesel ute, but I'm not far away from my EV. I convinced 2 of my family members to buy their first EVs in the last few months. So now I'm ashamedly the laggard in the family, but very close.
So I'm expecting good news next time we chat, right? On the next podcast.
Absolutely.
And look, the good news is shared by other countries around the world. So if we look at Germany, the sales in March were up to 24% of new sales from 20% in the previous year. France up to 29% from 20%. So the good news is pretty much shared everywhere outside of the US. So unfortunately, there's sales have gone the other way because Trump's taken away some of the incentives that were in place. So I think a lot of the electric vehicle manufacturers are looking for other countries to send their cars, and I think just send them here. We'll take them.
Yeah. Tom, what do you think the next 12 months of EV uptake looks like? I mean, no one has a crystal ball, and I'm not asking you what you think is going to happen with a war in another country, but what do you think this means for us? Is this going to continue?
Look, I think it's only going to go from here. And again, I don't have a crystal ball, but just you touched on a point earlier about word of mouth. And, if your neighbor or your colleague or your family member's got an EV, they're only going to talk good things about it. And it's just going to spread. How do you find a good business? It's word of mouth. That's always been the way, organic growth. So I think the more people get into EVs, the more the good word gets out, then smart people will start looking at their own numbers and go, hey, you know what? It's actually not too bad. I think it's much better to drive an EV. Accountants will start saying to their clients, hey, it's cheaper, to depreciate an EV, fringe benefit tax exemptions, all those things. And I think it'll just grow. I think we're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg of what's to come.
There's another hot topic you just mentioned there. We've got the federal budget coming out very soon, and some details already released to the media or predictions released. One of those is the changes to the fringe benefits tax, which we've had confirmed will be wound down from April next year. For anyone who hasn't seen, from the 1st of April 2027, the fringe benefits tax exemption will only apply to EVs that are under $75,000, which is still a very significant portion, actually the majority of the EVs available in the market here. And then from 2 years later, for all EVs, only 25% exemption from the tax. So it's going to be wound down slowly. A big part of that, obviously, because it has worked. The exemption has actually worked better than expected. The government's original estimates were that there were going to be around a $70 million expense from the budget, and they've ended up spending about $1.3 billion because of the very high levels of uptake of vehicles, particularly on novated leases. Again, what do you think that's going to mean? Are we going to see a mad rush of people trying to buy vehicles in the next 12 months to make the most of that exemption while it still exists?
Yes. Basically, yes. I mean, now is the best time, right? There's no better time to get to an EV. You've got 12 months to get your act together. And just because it's ending doesn't mean that the lease is ending. So if you get in before the final date, then you still got 3 years, 5 years after that to take advantage of that. And I think the new cutoff, the new sweet spot will be $75,000. I mean, if you can get a car for under 75 grand, as you said, there's pretty much all the good cars are under 75. You can get to a lot of decent EVs in that amount. Manufacturers will go, why should we price a car more than 75? Our customers can't get an FBT exemption. So I think that's the new cutoff.
Yeah, I think it's a sensible reduction to that threshold. I've taken advantage of the novated leases for both of my EV purchases, and for anyone that doesn't understand how that works, effectively you're deducting your salary for the repayments, which means you're saving your marginal tax rate on the repayments. So you might be paying 7% interest on the loan itself, but you could be saving 40 or 47% on the repayments. So it's makes the EV purchase an absolute no-brainer. And Tom's exactly right. Like, both of the EVs I bought were below that 75,000 threshold. There is plenty of choice. And in fact, the majority of the sales that, those 16,000 sales, I'd say probably 15,000 of them were below that 75 mark. It's really just, the top end Teslas and the Polestars and the Porsches that are above that limit.
Yeah, and if you look around the streets of where you live, you'll see who's got a new EV and what they're driving, and they're not many Porsches going around. The numbers sort of paint the picture for us. So who've been the big winners, Tom, of the last couple of months of significant EV uptake?
Yeah, if you look at the last couple of months, so the big players, Tesla, BYD, they're always going to be up there. BYD, just on a side note, they're now, as of April, they were the number 2 selling brand of all cars, not just EVs, ICE and EVs, only second to Toyota, which is an incredible feat for a brand that's only been in the country for 3 years. It's unbelievable, honestly. But other brands like Geely, the Geely EX5 was second on the list last month. Phenomenal effort from the local team. Zeekr as well posted 1,000 deliveries in Australia, including 973 of the Zeekr 7X. I'm sure you've seen those around. Pretty nice looking car. MG, of course, Kia, and a lot of other really good brands at the moment.
Yeah, BYD is interesting because they've been able, over the 3 years they've been here, I think I was one of the first cabs off the rank with the BYD Auto 3, and that's all you could get from BYD at that stage. Now there's 15 odd models, a lot in the hybrid space as well. They've really, come up very quickly. And I guess maybe in a few years we'll be talking about them overtaking Toyota for that number 1 spot.
I reckon a few months, just quietly. I think they're getting there.
There's a hot prediction. We'll wait for the numbers to come out. I mean, I saw, Tom, on your feed, you've recently done a review of a Toyota EV. Maybe the first one that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, it's the only one in the country, the Toyota BZ4X. When I reviewed it 2 years ago with their first iteration, I wasn't too flattering about it because it was expensive. The specs weren't great compared to what Tesla was offering. But now with the new updated version, I'm grudgingly saying that yes, it's not bad. They've dropped $10,000 off the original price. Decent battery, decent range, quite efficient, and hey, it's a good feeling, right, Toyota? Like, it's a good brand, reliable. So I think, they've at least made a decent effort into the EV space.
It's good, and it's good to see that from a legacy brand. But they certainly haven't got a head start. They've got a long way to catch up to a lot of the Chinese manufacturers. We'll see how that plays out over the next little while, because obviously they've got brand reputation. There are a lot of Toyotas on the road and a lot of Toyota drivers who, when they make the switch to an EV, may well just look to get another Toyota. So we'll see how that goes against the EVs that have really built up market share over the last 2-3 years.
Well, so if there's anyone out there that's still on the fence as to the financial reasons for getting an EV, I've run some numbers on the latest petrol prices and a comparison between a Toyota Corolla and a BYD Auto 2. Similar dimensions, actually the same upfront cost of $36,000 after on-road cost, roughly. So based on a total cost of ownership over 5 years, what we're looking at in petrol for the Toyota Corolla is $12,000 and about $3,000 of servicing. And if you factor in that with the BYD Auto 2 that you can charge 80% of that through the free 3 hours or through solar or through any of the low-priced EV plans that are out there, the estimate is around $1,200 and servicing also $1,200. So that means after 5 years, you spent $51,000 with the Toyota Corolla and $38,000 with the BYD.
That's a big gap.
So it's no longer a case of that EVs, you're spending a little more to get an EV. You're actually spending a little more to get a petrol car. And so how much money does this fringe anxiety or the whatever myth that's holding you off? There's still 85% of people are still buying these petrol cars. So there must be something there that's still swaying them that way.
I think there's a lot of brand loyalty with Toyota. I did a video a couple of years ago on the Tesla Model 3 versus the Toyota Camry. It's one of my best viewed videos, over 250,000 views. Wow. But I copped a lot of comments from Toyota people. There's just a lot of hardened Toyota fans out there who just will not let go of their Toyota. And for good cause. I mean, it's been a good brand for so long. But sometimes you can get blindsided. You can be a bit narrow-minded. And Toyota have done well with their marketing, with reliability, all that kind of stuff. But I just hope people just open their eyes a bit. Just do the maths. It's very simple maths. Jeff, you already mentioned how much savings you encounter in 5 years. It is almost a no-brainer at the moment.
I want to jump in on the maths before we move on, though, because I know that I can already see the comments and the feedback we're going to get from some people saying, I'm a renter, I don't have solar. What if I'm not at home to charge my car during those free 3 hours? It sounds like, Jeff, you didn't necessarily do the numbers at the other end of the scale, but we've seen this done by many, many publications. You can do it yourself online. If you charge an EV in the worst case scenario, you only use public charging, you're charging at 55, maybe 60 cents a kilowatt hour, the numbers are still very clear. The total cost of ownership, whether you're looking at 5 years or 15 years, there's a huge gap, and it's way cheaper to own an EV, even if you don't have the advantages like you mentioned.
I don't have those numbers prepared, Dan, but yes, we've got a $13,000 difference at this rate, so it's a lot to make up between the two. And, this does factor in current petrol prices, so maybe they will normalize and that gap will shrink back. But I think the important message is it's cheaper right now to get an EV. So if you're buying a petrol car, you're paying a premium. So I think a lot of people aren't in that mindset yet. I think people still think that the cheaper option up front is the petrol car. And that's really changed in the last 12 months.
Maybe let's take a step away from the numbers and the uptake here in Australia. Tom, I know it's a big part of what you do now and what you get to do. One of the benefits of the job is to travel around the world, particularly travel to China and get to see into the future, so to speak, of what's coming to Australia. You were recently there maybe a month or two ago, is that right?
Last week, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very recent. What took you there this time?
Okay, so I was there last month for two reasons. One, for a family holiday, which was in itself eye-opening for my kids to see, first of all, their ancestry, as we are of Chinese heritage, and to see, as you said, the future. They really are living in the future in China for many reasons. But one, definitely for the fact that in some cities like Guangzhou, we were there last year, I reckon 80% of cars were EVs. And you can tell they're EVs because they've got the green plates driving around. The streets are cleaner, they're quieter. All you hear is the honking, but you don't hear the diesel hum or the petrol rumble. So that was the family trip, very enlightening, very eye-opening from a cultural point of view. And then last week, Joy and I, my wife, who's also on the channel, we went courtesy of Geely, which is one of the big groups in China, and Zeekr. They invited us there for a week for the Beijing Auto Show, which was eye-opening. It was unbelievable. If you imagine this hall here we are right now, that would be half a hall, and there are about 20 of those halls. So
Wow.
just picture how big that was, and filled with cars, filled with solar, etc. It was unbelievable. And it is a great perk to have, and I'm very fortunate to have that opportunity to see what China has in store for countries like Australia with their EVs. And there are a lot of good options coming to Australia, I would say, in the next few months.
What sort of trends can you see in the new vehicles over there? Are there features, charging speeds? What are the things that really stood out that are going to, make their way to Australia over the next year or two?
Yeah, all of the above, I reckon. So the next wave, very short-term wave, is the small car, the small hatch, the small compact SUV. It's probably targeted at people who want to get away from their big diesel utes and their big diesel SUVs. There's one car that I'm very much looking forward to. It's the Geely EX2. This is the top-selling EV in China at the moment. Just imagine a Toyota Yaris, that kind of size. If it can ask for less than $25,000, which is what the cheapest EV in Australia is at the moment, the BYD Atto one, it's just going to kill it. It's going to mop the floor with all cars at the moment. It's the top-selling car in China, top-selling car in Malaysia. It launched in South Africa recently, cheaper than the Atto one. And so I think the small car will be the one that we're looking forward to. Other trends, fast charging. BYD is now boasting their flash charger from 10 to 97% in 9 minutes. They had a cold booth where you could stick your hand in to prove how cold it was. And that cold temperature room, which was minus 30 degrees Celsius, only added 3 more minutes to their charging time. So 12 minutes from 10 to 97%, which is incredible.
Wow. And perhaps Australian listeners won't really get the relevance of that cold room. Could you maybe explain why that's something that is worth noting?
I mean, traditionally, cold temperatures slow down EV charging. Obviously, more relevant in countries like Northern China, North America, Europe, etc. But we luckily don't get that kind of temperatures here. But it's just good to see brands like BYD actually taking note of challenges for EV charging and being serious about it to cover all bases.
I think what's interesting with that is that it's 10 to 97%. That's like a very realistic charge that you would do at a charge point. A lot of the records or the fast charging is like 20% to 60% or some chunk of the battery charging spectrum that's actually really fast, and then it slows right down from there. So to be able to maintain those speeds through to 97% is quite staggering, and that's really going to make a difference at the Bowser.
Yeah, those speeds are also going to make a difference for a lot of people who, in their mind, think it's less convenient to own an EV because I'm going to have to hang around and wait while it charges. And whether that's a real hindrance or not, because we know that most people do end up charging at home, that's going to make a big difference mentally for people when they think, oh, I pull up to the petrol station or the equivalent an EV charging station, and 10 minutes later I'm driving away full. That mental change is going to convince a lot of people who probably still sit on the fence right now.
I mean, for many years, we on the channel would say, oh, look, half an hour charging, go have a coffee, go sit down, have a break, play with the kids. But if it's 9 minutes, there's no way you can do that. You have to stay with the car almost. It's almost too quick for number one at the toilet, right? So, and I think even Cherry, another brand there, they were advertising 6-minute fast charging. So it's getting ridiculous. It's faster than petrol because you don't have to pay at the servo anymore. But I guess on a serious note, it's not so much about the speed, but we also need more public chargers on the highways. In cities like Sydney and Melbourne, where it's denser in the inner city, we need more public chargers for that purpose. So hopefully brands like BYD, Zeekr, you name it, Xpeng, will bring their own chargers like Tesla have done in Australia and really help build that confidence for EV owners.
I wanted to ask you, Tom, about utes. So I'm not sure what sort of ute segment they have in the Chinese domestic market, but that is the biggest market in Australia. And it's one that's yet to be cracked by electric vehicles. Obviously, we've seen what's happened with the BYD Shark, rise to immense popularity so quickly. Surely that's a big signal to all these companies that, hey, there's this big unserved segment. Australia's ready to get an electric ute. Were there any utes over there that you saw that might be making their way to Australian shores soon?
Yeah, it's definitely a burgeoning segment. I don't think it's quite ready yet. That's why BYD was smart to bring a plug-in hybrid for the Shark 6 to show that the range is still there. The problem with utes is that obviously it's a heavy vehicle. You're towing, you're carrying. As soon as you do that, the payload will just drop the battery range. So you don't want to seem ridiculous either, where the range drops from 300 to 150. Right? No one's going to take that kind of ute seriously. So I think until such time where the battery density gets better, like say with a solid state, I think we're probably going to wait a few more years for that to happen. And plus, China, utes are not big over there. It's very much in the commercial segment there. They've got small lorries or smaller cars or smaller trailers they use to carry their load. You don't really see the Rangers or the Hiluxes over there as such, so it's not their priority. What they do love, though, is the big SUVs or the off-roading SUVs. That's starting to be another trend as well, I see. So maybe get that one right, and then maybe the utes will come.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose that, even though it being the biggest category in Australia, that's still a small market in a global perspective, and these brands all have a very global mindset in terms of distribution. But it's interesting that Rivian seem to have a very popular pickup, as they call it in the US, that's fully electric. And it's largely been taken up by, along with, tradesmen, there's like an adventure segment where these people want to take them off-road and they want to do other things beyond like a work capacity with these vehicles. I think that's very true of Australians as well, right? Like the average Ford Ranger, you see a lot of people who don't need a big ute driving them around in the city. So I suspect the EV version, even without the towing capability, may have some success.
Yeah, I think that's why the Shark 6 has done so well. It's just, first of all, a good-looking vehicle. It's got the range. It can tow 2.5 tons, which is enough. And it's just got V2L, all those kind of things you want for a recreational vehicle. So, there was a ute called the Radar that's launched in New Zealand as well. It's done by Geely. Range is not so good, 350 Ks, but it's starting to happen. And I think cost is an issue as well. So, how much is a Hilux here? It starts from 50, is it? Something like that?
Yeah, 50 to 60.
So they need to nail that price as well. So need to undercut or very close to 50 grand, and we'll start to see some movement in the EV space.
One thing I've noticed here at Smart Energy is there's not a lot of talk about EVs and EV charging. It is a conference that's really focused on energy storage, batteries and solar. But the conversations that are happening around EVs and EV charging this year particularly are focused on heavy vehicles. Vehicle to grid, of course, which has been an ongoing conversation for a while, but really focusing on those big, heavy vehicles, which is not an easy one to crack. What did you see in China that might help us to understand what's coming and what's going to help transform the trucking industry?
Yeah, I must admit, at the Auto China, I didn't see too many big commercial vehicles. It was more focused on passenger, smaller type commercial vehicles. So can't probably comment too much on that. And we've got the Horizon, that's a Geely vehicle. We did see that as well. But yeah, not too much, unfortunately. And I guess my focus on the channel is more on passenger as well, which is my passion rather than big utes and big trucks. But I think there's certainly brands out there doing that kind of work. And that, you're right, it's a lot of the emissions are from trucks and bigger cars. So yeah, that needs to be sorted out for sure.
Yeah, it's a really important one to crack as far as emissions go, because obviously there's heavy trucks all over the country on roads 24/7. And those big vehicles moving big loads produce a lot of carbon. I suppose I asked the question, but I can now delay the question because we're actually going to be interviewing some guests for our next episode next month who really focus on that space. So any listeners who want to hear the answers, tune in 4 weeks.
So, Tom, you picked up the keys to an MG S5 around 6 months ago, and one of your latest videos was a 6 month review of that car. I know you're probably driving a lot of different electric vehicles, but you must have spent some time in that vehicle now, and give us an overview of your thoughts.
Yeah, that compact SUV segment is so crowded at the moment. I've got a spreadsheet on my channel and it's just probably the largest segment. It's like 20 really good cars from China, from Europe, from Korea. We picked the MG S5 based on the drive dynamic. I'm very keen on how it handles and how it rides. And I think the MGs, the ICE cars aren't so good. I'm going to get in trouble for that. But the EVs are really good. They've done a great job with the S5, the MG4 EV Urban, even the old MG4. They're just the rear-wheel drive aspect of it. The MG S5 is just phenomenal. Very stable drive, good ride handling, and surprisingly quite roomy. We took it for the couple of airport runs to China. We managed to fit a lot of suitcases in the back, surprisingly. I was shocked, actually. It was quite roomy for what it was. And we got it primarily as a city car. I'm not going to do any road trips with it. It's just to get around town and kids drop off and that kind of stuff and get to work. So for that kind of purpose and for the price, I think it's exceptional value for what it is.
What is the price at the moment?
I think it starts from about 40 grand, if I'm not wrong. And then if you add a few more extras, maybe say 44, 45.
Yeah, so you're very right in that it's a crowded segment. It seems to be a very popular space for these EV brands to start in, is like to bring out the SUV or maybe a sedan and then branch out from there. But yeah, there's a lot of competition there. And MG were one of the big winners from the last couple of months, picking up quite a lot of extra sales. But another brand in there, Kia, came third in March. The first time I think they've popped into there. I looked at some April numbers and they had actually overtaken Tesla into second. I'm not sure if they're final numbers yet. I think there may be some shipping issues because Tesla are a little bit below what I expected them to come in at. But Kia are certainly making big waves here. They've been one of the early brands that have had EVs. The next generation models coming out now are getting better and better.
Yeah, Kia's kicking a lot of goals in the EV space. They've got EV3, EV5, EV6, EV9, even I've got the EV, sorry, that's Hyundai, sorry, sister company. But EVs, the Kias have done very well. The EV3, I think, won World Car of the Year last year, and for good reason. I think Kia still appeals to a lot of people, like Hyundai, because, they're quote unquote legacy. People know the brand. They may be hesitant jumping into a Chinese brand, especially a new one, but Kia, they know, okay, they've been in the country for 20 years. They've proven themselves, and the product is still very good. So I'm not surprised they're doing well.
And they do actually have Kia at this show. The New South Wales government have a demonstration stand here where they're powering the entire stand off the battery of the Kia. The team's been checking in on it. I think they're down at 92% on midway through day 2. So the battery's doing pretty well.
Well, what else have you been looking at recently, Tom? I know that you're basically driving a new vehicle every week. What else has sort of impressed you recently? What else are we going to see?
Yeah, one of the big winners this year has been the Omoda JQ J5. Chery's really been quite aggressive with their pricing. For a car that looks like basically a Range Rover Evoque, and not that it's flouting any copyright issues. One of their designers is actually poached from Land Rover, JLR, to design this vehicle. And it's got a lot of inclusions. The tech is not bad. The drive is okay, but for the price, $36,000 drive away, that's phenomenal value for how much car that offers. And not surprisingly, they're selling a lot of cars. From what I've heard, they've got 6,000 orders already, and a lot of them have been delivered. So I think Chery's really been quite aggressive with their marketing in Australia.
Yeah, they're another one that's popped into that top 10 list from seemingly nowhere, not having any cars really last year. And what a great time to launch a brand when petrol prices are going through the roof. But yeah, someone in our team has actually purchased one of those JQs and has all been extremely positive reports on it so far. And it's like on paper, it seems to get a lot of value for, $39,000.
And can I just say, there's a lot of hesitancy around people buying these Chinese brands because they think, is it going to last in Australia? Like, are they going to go bankrupt tomorrow? At the Beijing Auto Show, I always look at how big the stands are. So Chery is definitely one of the big players. You imagine their stand is as big as probably double the length of this hall. That's how big that stand is, covering JQ, Omoda, Chery. You cannot fathom how big that brand is. GWM is another one. BYD would take up 2 of these halls. So for me, seeing that in real life, that confidence in me is enough to say, okay, look, these brands are not going anywhere. They will be here for a long time.
Yeah, I think it was the first time we had you on the show that really dropped for me that, the brands that make it here to Australia are generally the biggest ones in China. There's a lot of reports that there's so many brands now. There's a lot of obscure ones. Most of those aren't, exporting, going to the effort to export their cars into Australia. So the Geelys and sub-brands, the Omoda Cherries and the sub-brands, and the BYD, they're the ones that are probably going to stand the test of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the other thing to report from the numbers, beyond EVs, the hybrid or the gateway drug of the electric vehicle industry, those numbers are absolutely soaring as well. And I was half expecting that the hybrid market might shrink a little bit because it got removed from the fringe benefit tax exemption last year. If we're at 15% of new sales for electric vehicles, full BEVs in March and April, it was 25% for hybrids. So that means 40% of new vehicles had some type of battery in it that's powering the drivetrain. So those figures, again, they're up from 18% last year. So it seems like the fringe benefit tax coming off hasn't hindered that market at all.
No, that's exactly what the policymakers want to see. They don't want to see a huge drop-off when a policy like that changes. If the policy has done its job well, they've created the wave and the momentum for the industry to carry itself on.
Yeah, and I suspect things like the BYD Shark entering that U category is playing its role there, because that is basically the only hybrid in that segment. There never was one, and that's came only late last year. And if you look at the numbers, Tom, like that car's really taking off, and a lot of the other BYD, the Sea Lion, and those SUVs are really driving their numbers as well.
Yeah, look, without sounding like I'm paid by BYD, which I'm not, but BYD really have done incredible things in the last few years. I think the two things they've done that have really transformed the landscape in Australia is, one, the BYD Shark 6, and then two, sponsoring the Sydney Roosters. If you want to do well in Australia, do something with sport. Like we've got South Sydney Rabbitohs with MG, and that's done well for MG, and now BYD with the Roosters. So that prominence, that awareness has really helped the brand. I guess I'm always a bit hesitant promoting plug-in hybrids. Like I think it's great, as you said, it's a good gateway drug to get people thinking about electrification. And I understand that not everywhere has a charger. You may want to travel to regional New South Wales or Victoria or wherever, where there may not be charging facilities, and I understand that. So there's still a place for plug-in hybrids, but I think in the city, it's probably not as relevant if you've got home charging. But I think the solution really is more chargers, more choice, and then I think the plug-in hybrid market will probably shrink over the next 10 years.
Yeah, you're right about that. That sporting connection. We're seeing that here at the Smart Energy Conference, where we've got Ian Thorpe as a sponsor for one, or as a ambassador for one brand. We've got Alex Carey, the cricketer, as an ambassador for another brand. So I think that some of the Chinese manufacturers have definitely picked up on that being a way to find a route into people's hearts and minds in Australia.
But is rugby league the battleground for these electric vehicle brands? So there's some other popular sports in Australia too.
It depends what vehicle. I think if you're pushing a ute, then rugby's not a bad way to go.
Yeah, maybe Polestar should stick to AFL or cricket or something.
One thing I'll touch on, because it was mentioned yesterday, there was some talks going on here about V2G, which we talked about here on the show with quite a few different guests, vehicle to grid, and those who are keen on the topic and enthusiasts will know that there are a number of pilot programs going on right now with vehicle manufacturers, electricity retailers and DNSPs to basically get a lot more data to understand what impact positive and negative vehicle to grid is going to have on the grid and also on the vehicle batteries themselves. One thing that really jumped out to me, and this was coming from someone in the know who's been traveling to China on and off for the last 4 years, doing research trips. It's actually a guest we're going to have on the podcast next month. Her name's Portia Rooney. Really, she's really immersed in this space. A question came up from the audience, which was, when are we going to see V2G being taken up by the public, in the mass market? And her number, she said, was 3 years. We've already been talking about vehicle to grid for more than 3 years. Certainly the enthusiasts are getting stuck in now. Those who are really keen are in the pilot programs. But I was really surprised to hear that. I thought that we were on the cusp. In fact, the number from someone really in the know is a few years down the track. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm keen to get Tom's take, because I know he's been hanging out for that SIG Energy bidirectional charger. But I think, the main thing still holding us back is the warranties of these cars. I think, as we spoke last month with Matt Downey from Vita Grid, the chargers are there. You can jump onto a wholesale linked electricity plan. You can get money from exporting energy. The thing that people are very nervous about is these cars come with long warranties, and you don't want to stuff around with your 8-year warranty, because it is most of the value of the car is that battery. But Tom, what are your thoughts? Have you got the bidirectional charger installed yet?
I haven't, but there's no stock. That's the problem. I've reached out to my installer. He said to me next month. So fingers crossed before winter comes along. Yeah, I don't know. V2G, I feel like the spike prices, those days might be coming to a close, or at least not as prevalent as it was. I looked at the stats for the last 3 months. I think there were only 2 or 3 spikes from Amber, which means that maybe the batteries are doing their job, which is stabilizing the grid, at least in New South Wales, which is a good thing for the community, but not so much for big battery owners. So I think for me, V2H is quite interesting. There's winter where you do use a lot of heating, because let's face it, most Australian homes are rubbish at insulating against the cold. So if I can have enough energy from my car to power my home to cover, that expensive period during the evening times, then I think that could be quite useful for my potential DC charger, for my SIG.
Yeah, the cheap home batteries program really got in the way of V2G in a way because a lot of people have already installed enormous batteries in their garage. 350,000 batteries that have been installed since the 1st of July last year, which you're right, it's had a stabling impact on the grid. There's not these big spikes. And, one factor of that is that 350,000 times the average of 24 kilowatt hours is actually already bigger than what Snowy 2.0 was supposed to deliver to the grid. So we've had a massive generator being distributedly installed into people's homes, and that's changing power, and it will have the eventual effect of decreasing electricity prices. And we're seeing that already because the default market offer on the 1st of July is actually going down this year, which is not usually the case.
And maybe you can explain what that means for people who might not be thinking about electricity prices and tariffs all the time.
Yeah, so the default market offer, I think roughly about 20 or 30% of Australian homes are on the default market offer. And so if you haven't taken up a specific plan with your retailer, they'll drop you back onto this default market offer. And it's a regulated plan that can't go above a certain spend. So the regulators come in and say, yep, you can put them onto any default plan, but as long as the annual spend doesn't exceed this. So that cap is actually going down this year. So I think, last year everyone was upset and searching around for electricity suppliers because that default market offer had gone up quite a significant percentage.
Something, I guess, to know, though, if someone's looking at their own bill, realizing they're on the default market offer, even though it may be going down this time, it's not actually where you want to be. You end up on the default offer if you've not been optimizing, not switching retailers and finding the best option for you. So it's not necessarily where you want to be sitting for your 12-month billing period.
No, it's generally sensible to look around and find a plan that suits your needs. And Tom, since we last spoke, I know we connected you with one of our installers. You've installed a pretty big 40 kilowatt hour SIG Energy battery. And yeah, tell us a little bit about your early experience with that, what electricity plans you're on. I know we've brought you over to Flow Power recently to trial that one, but how's your early experience been?
Yeah, so it's been great. It's first of all, our installer, Infinite Electrical, very good. They did a great tidy install for my garage. Very, very low profile, very low footprint. So yeah, no problems at all from that point of view. It was great over summer because I was originally with Amber, and we took advantage of those spikes where you sort of do some app watching and go, oh yes, it's going up, earning ridiculous amounts of money just from doing nothing. And yeah, I was in the negative territory for a long time. But as I said, I think the spikes have stabilized to the point where Jeff jumped me onto to Flow Power. I haven't got a bill yet, but from the app you can see that they've got this sweet window between 5:30 to 7:30 where you can export energy at quite a high rate, relatively speaking. So I can see I'm in the negative even during autumn. Autumn? Yeah, we're in autumn. So, which I think if you're with Amber, you may not be doing as well because there's not as big spikes with Amber anymore. But we'll see what winter brings. I guess it'll be interesting to see whether the spikes still continue in winter.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that kind of comparison, which I imagine you have planned for the channel. So anyone that takes a look at your channel in the coming months, maybe there'll be a video there comparing the two. But I imagine your electricity bills, regardless with that 40 kilowatt hour battery, are close to zero, if not negative, despite having several EVs on charging in the garage most days.
Yeah, definitely. Haven't had a positive bill in a while. And luckily my wife Joy works from home, so she can charge the cars to take advantage of solar, which is great. I've got a question for you guys, actually. Given that there have been so many battery installs, what's the feel from your clients on the payback? Are they happy with the bills that they're getting? Do a lot of them install the batteries wanting to make money or just to stabilize their bills? Like, what's the general client?
I think as the rebates ticked over from the 1st of May, the days of those 40 to 50 kilowatt hour batteries that you jumped on, and I did as well, I'll admit, but are probably coming to an end. I think a lot of people are looking at smaller batteries sized to tackle their own usage, maybe a bit of surplus for future expansion if they might buy an EV in the future or something like that. But it's certainly not putting a battery in 3 times the size of what they need to try and sell electricity back into the grid, partly because the rebate's not quite there anymore for those bigger batteries, but it still exists at quite an attractive level for a smaller appropriate battery. So, and for most people, that looks like something between 15 to 20 kilowatt hours.
I think on the payback front, it's obviously still early days for most people who've jumped on this home battery program. I guess the majority have been installed actually in the last 6 months, although the program's been running for a bit longer. we'll start to hear more stories over the next few years when people realize they've crossed that threshold and they've basically paid off their entire install with the savings in electricity. But I can certainly, this is anecdotally from people I've been able to speak to, whether it's family members or friends who've jumped on it as well, just seeing how much they're saving per month, especially going into winter. I think people are going to be pretty happy with the return that they're getting on their investment.
The other thing that's very prevalent at the moment is that we're benefiting from the fact that Australia is now the largest solar battery market in the world. So at conferences like this, it's absolutely overrun by all the battery manufacturers because they want to showcase the latest technology and compete for the biggest market. So with that comes competition, and we're seeing that the average cost to have a battery installed, ignoring all rebates, is actually coming down as well. So the fact that the rebate has softened a little bit is more than countered by the fact that the battery prices are coming down, particularly at those lower sizes. And that's what we've seen with the solar market. You know, the solar rebate in Australia has been around for over a decade, but the cost of solar over that decade has decreased, despite the fact that the rebate has decreased, because the improvements in technology and pricing has accelerated ahead of that decline. So I think, you know, the scheme that the government has set up was done with that in mind. And I think hopefully, well, you know, a lot of people in this room are probably hoping that that demand for batteries continues all the way through to 2030 and beyond.
I mean, it's very early days yet, but we already have some early data that sort of indicates that that is the case. We know that with government rebate programs and funding, often there's this mad rush of people in the last weeks or month of a program who just want to make the most of the funding. And then there's a bit of a dead period afterwards. And while we're expecting a little bit of that, a bit of a slowdown after the 1st of May, I know it's only 5 days into the month, but we can already see from our platform where people are coming to get quotes to connect with installers to get batteries and solar, there's really not been much of a slowdown at all. So even though, like Jeff said, the bigger batteries may not be installed at the same rate, people are still going to keep ploughing ahead with batteries at home.
That's right. And that's probably just about all we have time for today. If you're interested to find out more about Tom and his channel, Ludicrous Feed, then check it out on YouTube, ludicrousfeed.com.au, and also check out our last podcast where we went a bit further behind the scenes on the early days of the channel and how Tom and his wife Joy run that channel. So, Tom, any final comments before we leave you? Thanks again for coming and joining us.
No, just great to be here. And yeah, thanks again, Jeff and Dan, for having me on.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you on the next one. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. And make sure you share an episode with someone that you think might enjoy it. Leave us a review, leave us a comment. It really does make a difference for us. And if you need a quote for anything related to home electrification, solar, batteries, heat pumps, aircon, and of course EV charging, head to solarchoice.net.au to get instant quotes from pre-vetted installers. See you next month.